Buongiorno, buongiorno, hello, hello. How is everybody this evening? Welcome back, guys. Welcome back, welcome back. Welcome to The Rule of the Mafia, Part 1. Glad to have you all here. Glad to see you all here. I hope everybody's having a good evening so far. Thank you all for joining me earlier today. Willie, welcome back, brother. Let's see who we got in here with us tonight. I know it's not going to be as many as what we normally have. We don't have that many people in these streams in the evenings, but it's okay. Oh, Ms. Heather's welcome back, dear. Good to see you. Sunny days. Happy to have you back. Good to have you. Fixed Logic, welcome back. Miss Bonnie Messick, welcome. Miss Sherry, good to see you. Root is in the house. Mr. Willie, welcome back, my friend. Good to have you back. Great conversation, sir. Miss Brandy, the OG, is back. Good to have you here. Thanks for joining us. Let's see here. Bonnie Bailey, good to see you. Bonnie Messick, I'm sorry. Come on in, everybody. Make sure you're hitting that like button on the way in the door, if you will, please, and share this out. I appreciate that so very much. As I said, guys, we're jumping into a new series in the evenings, kind of like what we used to do. We took a little break from it. We're coming back to it in a different way. I always called it the Midnight Series, so we'll just keep on calling it that. And it is good to be back. And guys, like I said, we're jumping into something now. It's called the Mob Rule of the Mob, whatever you want to call it. We're going all the way back to the beginning. Going back to the old days. Canadian True Crime Buff, welcome. Good to have you here. We have music playing. Okay. Good stuff. Mudman, what's up? Good to see you. All right. That's enough of that. Again, thank you all for joining me tonight for this. I appreciate you so very much. Great to have you here. Come on in, guys. Grab a seat, grab your coffee, tea, whatever it may be. Come on in here, sit down, and have a conversation with me. Let me fix this here real quick. I'll be right back. The thing makes so much noise. Always at the wrong times. All right. All right, there we go. Good stuff. I hope you all are having a good evening. I hope you guys are into this, interested into this, and ready for this. It should be fairly interesting. Miss Zelda, good to see you. Miss Carolyn Miller, welcome back, dear. Good to have you here. That is perfectly fine. Come on in, have a seat, guys. Absolutely, Mudman. If we all could say a little prayer for Mudman's sister. She had open heart surgery today. Just even if you're not religious, if you would just kind of take some time, keep her in your thoughts and prayers, guys. We will, and wish nothing but good wishes in that direction. No worries, Mudman. No worries at all, my friend. Come on in, guys. Get comfy. We definitely got a lot to talk about with this tonight. 30 people in the house, guys. We got 25 likes. We're getting there. Let's make it match, folks. All right. Okay. So she totally proposed. La Casa Nostra. Oh, yeah. I'm a lot closer to this stuff than you would think, folks. Come on in, everybody. Get comfortable. I'll give you guys a few more minutes to get some more peeps in here. Share it out. Hit that like button. Leave me a little DNA on the like button. As I always say, it always helps. Let's share it out there. I want to get as many people in here that want to see this as we can so that they don't miss out on it. So we're going to run it kind of like we did with the other stuff that we were covering. Okay. Come along down. It's great to have you guys here. I appreciate you guys joining me for this tonight. I like doing these evening shows where we cover different things. Purple Addict, good to have you. Good to see you. Welcome. Good to have you here. Dawn Marie, welcome. Little touch DNA. That's right, Willie. Thank you, my friend. It kind of gives us a little step and a break away from the norm, what we do during the day, and a little something different to look at. And it's definitely very interesting. The mafia and its history is just so deep and long. There's so much of it, guys. And there's so much quite a bit of it, to be honest with you. And lots of stories to tell. So I am grateful to have you all here to want to hear it. Miss Heather. That was nice of you, Mudman. Miss Heather is a good woman. She really is. She is very pretty as well. So thank you for giving compliments where compliments are due. And to Miss Brandy as well. That was very nice, my friend. I appreciate that. I appreciate when you guys treat the moderators and all each other with respect and show that type of, appreciation for each other. That's the way it should be. We should all do that with each other, folks. That is a fact. All right, come on in and get your seat. All right. Let me see here. Am I pretty too, Mudman? Just kidding. Oh, come on in, guys. Find a seat. Maybe not. We may not get any more than this, and that's okay. I like that these are smaller and more intimate shows because there's a lot to talk about, and I can actually get closer with you guys in here and talk to you a little bit more one-on-one than I can. Thank you, Miss Heather. I appreciate you. Than I can in the bigger shows, so I appreciate that so very much. There you go. You guys are absolutely awesome. This is what I like to see between you all so very much. So tonight, guys, I'm going to be bouncing all over the place with this when I'm covering this. It's going to be every Monday and Thursday night until I get to where I feel like I've done enough of it, because there's quite a bit of it. Harsh one, Shelly, True Crime and Nature with Shelly. Welcome. Good to have you here. Thanks for joining us tonight. Awesome. Had to put some cheese on top. What are you making, Miss Shelly? Dago's very pretty. Okay. I don't know how to take that one, but thank you. Dago, you a handsome guy. Thank you so very much. I appreciate that. You're a good dude, bud. Good dude. So, like I said, we're going to be covering this now. And there's a lot, and I mean a lot, that we can look into. Thank you so very much, Miss Zelda. I appreciate that. I think you guys are all the beautiful people, as I put it. Every one of you guys. Homemade beef stroganoff. Hey. It's one of my favorites. Now, did you use ground beef Or did you use like chunks of beef? Because I think it's great either way, but. Nope, I have not heard about that, Mudman. Have not heard about that. And I'm not going to wait too much longer because I don't want to make you guys hang out and wait. So we're going to jump into this stuff. Pearl Outhouse, good to see you. Althouse, sorry. That did not sound right. Outhouse. Althouse. Well, it looks better than when I have all white hair. I'm going to shave it all off is what I'm going to do. Seen one of Bubbly's videos? I have not yet. I'm going to have to check that out when I get some time. Yeah, I miss beef too, Zelda. I love it. It's so expensive. We don't get to eat much of it. That's a fact. So we're going to start off here, guys. And like I said, I'm going to be jumping around. I have a lot of knowledge on this subject for multiple reasons. So something that I was kind of obsessed with growing up. And I've always had an interest in it. And I know people that know a lot about it. I've been told a lot of stories. I'm so sorry, Pearl. That didn't sound right. Althouse. Althouse, it should be pronounced. I agree. I believe. So we'll see. But like I said, guys, share this out. If you think anybody would be interested in jumping in here with it, I think CJ's live right now too. So it's probably going to be having a lot of people over there. So be it. But this is where we're going to start with. And like I said, I'll be bouncing around showing you different variations of different things on one of these or on these stories that we're talking about. And it's mixed up. It's all over the place, inside and out, guys. Different things from different people. So just hang on to your chairs because there's a lot with it. There really is. Unravel, welcome. Good to have you here. Good to see you. All right, so it'll be different, like I said, different times in history here. We're going to be jumping back and forth through different things. I'm going to be showing you specific things as well. Thank you, Ms. Heather. Again, this channel, guys, is 100% crowdfunded. Anybody that would like to support the channel to keep me coming to you every single day, there are the links for PayPal, Cash App, and Venmo. I do get that when it's sent through right away as compared to the super chats and the super stickers. So it is appreciated. It helps me to pay the bills to keep coming to you guys every single day like I do. So I appreciate you guys for that. Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Heather. So if you have any questions as I'm going through anything, be sure to stop me. I have no problem answering questions. I love to answer questions about this stuff, actually, because I do know quite a bit of it. I studied a lot of it for a long time. I did reports in high school on this stuff, everything. So I've always had a fascination with it. So feel free to ask any questions you can. And if I can't answer it, I will find you the answer for it. So I think we got more than enough people to get this rolling. If anybody else jumps in, so be it. I will catch them up. Again, thank you guys for joining me tonight. I appreciate and love all you guys. Welcome, Jules and Bean. Good to see you. Jules and Bean joined us Saturday night for a little bit there with the music going on, and I hope you had a wonderful birthday Saturday, and it's great to have you here. Thanks for joining us. All right, let's get this party started, guys. Give you some subtitles just in case you're not understanding what they're saying, and we are off. Like I said, if there's any questions, please feel free to ask me at any time.
In his 20s, Al Capone ruled an empire of crime in his Windy City: gambling, prostitution, bootlegging, bribery, narcotics trafficking, robbery, and murder. And this made him look untouchable in the eyes of law enforcement. Al Capone went on to become the most infamous gangster in American history. In 1920, during the height of Prohibition, Capone's multi-million-dollar Chicago operation in smuggling, prostitution, and gambling dominated the organized crime scene. He was responsible for many brutal acts of violence, especially against other gangsters. The most famous of these was the St. Valentine's Day Massacre in 1929, in which Al Capone ordered the assassination of 7 rivals. He was never charged for his criminality but finally was brought to justice for income tax evasion in 1931. But before we get to our story, support this channel by subscribing and commenting on this video. Alphonse Capone was born in 1899, in Brooklyn, New York, born by Italian immigrants Gabrielle and Teresina Capone. A poor family that went to America seeking a better life, the Capones, and their 8 children lived a typical immigrant life.
And before I hear it from anybody else, yes, I've already been told by multiple people that I resemble this guy. I don't think I do, but a lot of people do. I don't know why. I don't think I do at all, but so be it.
Lifestyle in a New York tenement. Capone's father was a barber, and his mother was a seamstress. There was nothing in Capone's childhood or family life that could have predicted his rise to infamy as America's most notorious gangster. Capone attended Brooklyn Elementary School where he was a good student, but began falling behind and had to repeat the 6th grade. It was around that time that he started playing hooky and hanging out at the Brooklyn docks. One day, Capone's teacher hit him for arrogance and he struck back. The principal gave him a beating, and Capone never again returned to school. By this time, the Capones had moved out of the tenement to a better home in the outskirts of the Park Slope neighborhood of Brooklyn. It was here that Capone would meet both his future wife, Mary Coughlin, and his mob mentor, numbers racketeer Johnny Torrio. Torrio was running a gambling operation near Capone's home when Capone began running small errands for him. Although Torrio left Brooklyn for Chicago in 1909, the two remained close. Early on, Capone stuck to legitimate employment, working in a munitions factory and as a paper cutter. He did spend some time among the street gangs in Brooklyn, but aside from occasional scrapes, his gang activities were mostly uneventful. In 1917, Torrio introduced Capone to the gangster Frankie Yale, who employed Capone as a bartender and bouncer at the Harvard Inn in Coney Island. It was there that Capone earned his nickname Scarface. One night, he made an indecent remark to a woman at the bar. Her brother punched Capone, then slashed him across the face, leaving 3 indelible scars that inspired his enduring nickname. When Capone was 19, he married May Coughlin just weeks after the birth of their child, Albert Francis. His former boss and friend Johnny Torrio was the boy's godfather. Now a husband and a father, Capone wanted to do right by his family, so he moved to Baltimore where he took an honest job as a bookkeeper for a construction company. But when Capone's father died of a heart attack in 1920, Torrio invited him to come to Chicago and Capone jumped at the opportunity. In Chicago, Torrio was presiding over a booming business in gambling and prostitution, but with the enactment in 1920 of the 18th Amendment prohibiting the sale and consumption of alcohol, Torrio focused on a new, more lucrative field, bootlegging. As a former petty thug and bookkeeper, Capone brought both his street smarts and his expertise with numbers to Torrio's Chicago operations. Torrio recognized Capone's skills and quickly promoted him to partner. But unlike the low-profile Torrio, Capone began to develop a reputation as a drinker and rabble-rouser. After hitting a parked taxicab while driving drunk, he was arrested for the first time. Torrio quickly used his city government connections to get him off. Capone cleaned up his act when his family arrived from Brooklyn. His wife and son, along with his mother, younger brothers, and sister all moved to Chicago, and Capone bought a modest house on the middle-class South Side. In 1923, when Chicago elected a reformist mayor who announced that he planned to rid the city of corruption, Torrio and Capone moved their base beyond the city limits to suburban Cicero. But a 1924 mayoral election in Cicero threatened their operations. To ensure they could continue doing business, Torrio and Capone initiated an intimidation effort on the day of the election, March 31, 1924, to guarantee their candidate would get elected. Some voters were even shot and killed. Chicago sent in police to respond, and they brutally gunned down Capone's brother Frank in the street. After an attempt on his life in 1925 by rival mobsters, Torrio decided to leave the business and return to Italy, turning over the entire operation to Capone. Scarface again ignored his mentor's advice to maintain a low profile and instead moved his headquarters to a plush suite in the Metropole Hotel in downtown Chicago. From there, he began living a luxurious and public lifestyle, spending money lavishly, although always in cash to avoid a trial. Newspapers of the time estimated Capone's operations generated $100 million in revenue annually. The press followed Capone's every move avidly, and he was able to gain public sympathy with his gregarious and generous personality. Some even considered him a kind of Robin Hood figure, or as anti-prohibition resentment grew, a dissident who worked on the side of the people. However, in later years, as Capone's name increasingly became connected with brutal violence, his popularity waned. In 1926, when two of Capone's enemies were spotted in Cicero, Capone ordered his men to gun them down. Unbeknownst to Capone, William McSwiggan, known as the hanging prosecutor, who had tried to prosecute him for a previous murder, was with the two marked men and all three were killed. Fed up with Chicago's gang-dominated lawlessness, the public clamored for justice. The police had no evidence for the murders, so instead, they raided Capone's businesses, where they gathered documentation that would later be used to strengthen charges against him of income tax evasion. By early 1929, Capone dominated the illegal liquor trade in Chicago. But other racketeers vied for a piece of the profitable smuggling business, and among them was Capone's longtime rival, Bugs Moran. Moran had previously tried to assassinate both Torrio and Capone, and now he was after Capone's top hitman, Machine Gun Jack McGurn. Capone and McGurn decided to kill Moran. On February 14, 1929, posing as police, McGurn's gunman assassinated 7 of Moran's men in cold blood in a North Side garage. Alerted to the danger as he approached the garage, Bugs Moran escaped the slaughter. Although Capone was staying at his Miami home at the time, the public and the media immediately blamed him for the massacre. He was categorized as public enemy number 1. In response to the public outcry over the St. Valentine's Day massacre, President Herbert Hoover ordered the federal government to step up its efforts to get Capone on income tax evasion. The Supreme Court had ruled in 1927 that income gained on illegal activities was taxable, which gave the government a strong case for prosecuting Capone. On June 5, 1931, the U.S. government finally indicted Capone on 22 counts of income tax evasion. Although the government had solid evidence against him, Capone remained confident that he would get off with a minimal sentence and struck a plea bargain in return for a 2.5-year sentence. When the judge in the case declared that he would not honor the agreement, Capone quickly withdrew his guilty plea, and the case went to trial. During the trial, Capone used the best weapon in his arsenal, bribery and intimidation. But at the last moment, the judge switched to an entirely new jury. Capone was found guilty and sent to prison for 11 years. Capone spent the first 2 years of his incarceration in a federal prison in Atlanta.
How about that for a prison cell, folks? Check that out. That don't look like no prison cell I ever saw. I'm just saying.
After he was caught bribing guards, however, Capone was sent to the notorious island prison Alcatraz in 1934. Isolated there from the outside world, he could no longer wield his still considerable influence. Moreover, he began suffering from poor health. On November 16, 1939, Al Capone was released after having served 7 years, 6 months, and 15 days, and having paid all fines and back taxes. Suffering from paralysis derived from syphilis, he had deteriorated greatly during his confinement. Immediately on release, he entered a Baltimore hospital for brain treatment and then went on to his Florida home, an estate on Palm Island in Biscayne Bay near Miami, which he had purchased in 1928. Following his release, he never publicly returned to Chicago. He had become mentally incapable of returning to gangland politics. In 1946, his physician and a Baltimore psychiatrist, after examination, both concluded Capone then had the mentality of a 12-year-old child. Capone resided on Palm Island with his wife and immediate family, in a secluded atmosphere, until his death due to a stroke and pneumonia on January 25, 1947. That brings us to the end of our story today. Kindly remember to hit that subscribe button and
Right, and that's where we start from. Hey, Vanessa, welcome. Good to have you back. Good to see you. Mama Bear's in the house. Welcome back, everybody. Sorry I didn't see all you in there. Thanks for joining us. Mikey, what's up? Good to see you. And that is where we're starting from, folks. And that is the basics on Mr. Al Capone, Alphonse Gabriel Capone. For those of you who didn't know that. Quite a character. Okay. Johnny Torrio got away from all that when it started getting dangerous, per se. You know, that's where it started for Capone, as it stated. Said he has a monster drink in his hand, but it's really a video and audio recorder. You can see him click on and on. Oh, okay. So, as you guys heard, where did it go? They talked about Capone being responsible for the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. It doesn't give you a whole lot of details on that scenario, but that's kind of where I'm going with that. I'm going to be giving you guys a little bit more per that and some other things. Like I said, we're only going to do so much per night, but we'll catch it all together eventually at some point, for sure. Let's see here. 1 second, guys.
The St. Valentine.
Okay. One moment.
The victims lined them up against.
1 second. I gotta get this to run for me. Thank you, Ms. Heather. I appreciate that so very much. 1 second, folks. Bring it down. There you go. Okay, sorry guys, I was having a little bit of technical issues there. Sorry about that. All right. Let's get moving. Welcome, Virginia. Good to see you. And we're off.
Contract killer Frank Gusenberg sustained 14 bullet wounds on February 14, 1929. In the SMC cartridge warehouse at 2122 North Clark Street in Chicago. The police arrived. It was as if his innocent childhood was calling him back. One of the police in the scene was Sergeant Clarence Sweeney, a man who was once his childhood friend in the same neighborhood that he and his brothers Peter and Henry grew up on. Frank, your brother's
I'll
dead.
explain it a little later.
Sweeney asked Gusenberg, who was on the brink of death. Who done it? No one done it, said Gusenberg, true to the code and the gangland principle of omerta, or absolute silence. No one shot me, he continued.
Nobody shot me.
Sweeney kept on asking even as Gusenberg was taken to the Alexian Brothers Hospital. Again, he said, I ain't no copper. Those were reportedly his last words. Gusenberg died 3 hours later after being shot. He was the last victim to die in one of the most notorious gangland slayings in America, the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, a gruesome crime that has mysteriously put nobody in jail. "70 rounds of bullets were said to have been shot at 10:30 a.m. on that fateful Valentine morning. A truckload of bootleg whiskey at a bargain price was supposed to be delivered in the SMC cartridge warehouse, but 4 men infiltrated the scene. 2 of them were camouflaged as police officers and a fake raid might have been announced. The other 2 were dressed in the classic suits, ties, overcoats, and hats. 7 men were lined up against a whitewashed wall, under a single dangling white light bulb, the bricks being the last thing they saw. They thought it was a routine police raid, so they allowed themselves to be disarmed. But then 2 12-gauge shotguns and 2 Thompson submachine guns, nicknamed as Tommy guns or Chicago typewriters, gunned them all down. Alas, those men did not have a rendezvous in that garage for some discreet gay Valentine meetup. The racket of bullets aroused the witnesses. Pretending to be the police, the 2 men in uniform held the other 2 at gunpoint as they escorted them in a black Cadillac sedan, equipped with a siren, a gong, and a rifle rack, looking exactly like the kind the police used. The massacre was allegedly the watershed moment between mob bosses Scarface Al Capone, co-founder and boss of the Chicago outfit, and his rival George Bugs Moran, head of the North Side Gang. Besides contract killers Frank and Peter Goosey Gusenberg, 3 of the other victims were also members of the North Side Gang. They were Moran's second-in-command and brother-in-law, a convicted armed robber and a reputed killer, Albert Kitchelik, alias James Clark, the gang's bookkeeper and business manager, an accountant and embezzler, Adam Hayer, a nightclub owner and a newly appointed official of the Central Cleaners and Dyers Association, Albert Weinshank. The 2 other collaborators were former optician turned gambler and gang associate who wanted to brag to his friends about his mob connections, Reinhard H. Schwimmer, and occasional mechanic for the gang, John May, the only one not in suits nor in police uniform, wearing instead a greasy brown coveralls. Alongside May was his dog, Highball. Unfortunately, the dog was not able to give a witness testimony due to a language barrier. Capone's prize, George Bugs Moran, was not among those who were murdered. He was running late. He and fellow gang member Ted Newberry reached the warehouse and saw the 4 perpetrators. He thought it was a police raid, so they slipped away and went to a nearby coffee shop. He signaled to another gang member, Henry Gusenberg, the younger brother of Frank and Peter, who then turned back. Another member, Willie Marks, also spotted the police car. He recorded the license number before escaping the neighborhood. The roaring 1920s ushered the rise of mob crime in Chicago. Influenced by the temperance movement that sought to limit alcohol consumption, The U.S. Senate just approved the 18th Amendment on January 16, 1919, ratifying it as part of the Constitution. It prohibited alcohol, and a year later, the whole country went dry, commencing the Prohibition era that would last from 1920 to 1933.
I'm sorry, Heather. I thought I was like immersed in this. No, Eyeball was not the name. Highball, like the drink Highball. Sorry, I should have said something like quicker. But thank you, Vanessa, for that.
The sale and transport of intoxicating liquors like wine and beer were banned. The sale of bootleg liquor rose, fueling lucrative opportunities for crime syndicates like the North Side Gang and the Chicago Outfit. The SMC garage, the scene of the crime, was rented for the illegal traffic of booze. It seemed that alcohol was so important that people would kill to have it. The streets were filled with blood and alcohol.
There looks like a bottle of Johnny Walker, folks. How about that? Now, this prohibition was a big deal back then. For those of you that aren't familiar with it, Allie, welcome. Good to have you here. Looks like a bunch of people left, but that's okay, guys. Prohibition was a big deal. You know, back then, it was a lot like the way drugs are at this point. You know, it's illegal. You can't do it. It's amazing to believe that at some point alcohol was illegal. Now, my grandfather, here, let me show you a little something here, guys. Give me 1 second. Okay, I got a couple of things I'm going to show you here to go along with this. If you can see it, you should be able to see it. Let's see here. This is my grandfather, my mother's father. If you can see these, let me try to change this up here. Hold on. Okay. Maybe not that way, but this is my grandfather here. The younger looking one, the shorter one. When he was about 16, okay? The guy he's standing with, I've heard stories about, but I don't know. So that'll tell you when this started. This is my grandfather and my grandmother, okay? Again, I think this ring light might be doing more damage than anything. My grandfather was very... Yeah, that's probably a good idea. I'll bring it right back up, I promise. There we go. There we go. Thank you, guys. I should have thought of that. So, again, this guy here, I heard stories about, but I don't know. This is my grandfather on the other side when he was 16 years old. This is when he started doing things. This is him when he was 21 years old. And my grandmother. Okay. This is their wedding day. You can kind of look at him and just just that's all. Yeah. So does Caden, my son. And now this is, don't you dare laugh at this picture. This is him as he got older, along with somebody else there. That's me. My grandfather was very big into, we're from this area, Cleveland, okay? There were things that went on in Cleveland a lot that he was involved with. But you want details? I can't give you details that way. I can, but there's stories that'll come with this stuff later. But that's where I get a lot of, yes, that was Little Dago. This is where I get a lot of the stuff that I knew. Thank you for that too, Miss Zelda. I got a lot of information from that from my grandmother. These two here. Now, this is my mother's side of the family, okay? My father's side of the family was a completely different story, but still, okay? I got stories from both of them before I was young, but, you know, I think my grandfather died when I was 14. My grandmother died, I was 30. So a lot of stories were told to me, especially as they got older, that I'll get into down the road. But like I said, my father's side of the family, believe this or not, were involved in law enforcement. But that doesn't mean that they were law enforcement. Okay? And I've heard stories from that side of my family. Very interesting stuff, which I will get into down the road too. So that time there, that picture of then you see them, the whole Cleveland thing, very big in the Cleveland area, very busy in the Cleveland area, always doing something. Okay. My grandfather, the story I was told, again, this guy here, was that he was a milkman. Drove a horse and buggy and was moved up into whatever the hell the trucks were. Okay. Back then. Nothing like what we have, obviously, now. But anyway, he was a milkman, delivered milk, is what I was told. I saw different pictures of him doing it, so on and so forth. That was his job, was being a milkman. Milkmen don't dress in suits all the time, though, do they? So that's kind of where I gathered. Yeah, anyway. He did work for this place called the Sanitary Dairy. Supposedly he got hurt. And then from there on out, he never worked again at the Sanitary Dairy. But he always had money in his pocket. He always had everything he ever wanted. Nice cars, nice this. My grandfather went to Las Vegas once a year and spent a month there. Came back up until the point that where he died. He still did that. That's how he lived. I have no idea what all he did in Vegas other than gamble. According to my mom and my aunts, that's what he did. So, and he was good at it, which I wish that would have rubbed off because I'm not. Yes. My grandmother, my wife my mother has some of those still. Welcome, Boston supports Atlanta. Stevie Irwin, good to see you, brother. So, again, just a little bit of insight into that kind of stuff. Moving forward.
Moran succeeded his aggressive predecessors. Former Polish-American leader of the North Side Gang, Earl J. Jaime Weiss, who was killed by the Chicago outfit. Co-leader Vincent the Schemer Jucci, who was killed by arresting officer Detective Dan Healy. And leader Charles Dean O'Banion, better known as Dion O'Banion, who was killed by Chicago outfit hitmen John Scalise and Albert Anselmi, and Frankie Yale, a close friend and second employer of Al Capone. Violence always ran amok amongst crime syndicates, but certain events probably contributed to the planned assassination of Moran. The North Side Gang had been connected to the murders of Antonio the Scourge Lombardo on September 7, 1928, and Pascalino Patsy Lolordo on January 8, 1929. They were presidents of the Union Siciliana and close associates of Scarface. Patsy's murder had been purported as a prelude to a planned assassination of Capone. Naturally, Al Capone had been widely assumed to be the main perpetrator for ordering the massacre. But He was happily vacationing at his retreat in Palm Island, Florida during the crime. Only a few believed him, though. He didn't need to be the one to pull the trigger anyway. But Moran still had a lot of other enemies. Perhaps the assassins actually came for the others, hence why he wasn't killed. Perhaps those supposed police officers in disguise were really policemen, as Frank Gusenberg actually alleged. Perhaps the massacre was a retaliation from the Purple Gang or the Sugar House Gang, another criminal mob participating in the bootlegging trade, for a recent hijacking of their whiskey. Perhaps it had something to do with the fight for control of the dry cleaning rackets, of which Albert Weinshank, one of the victims, was a central figure. The police even considered Moran as a suspect at one point, perhaps out of the members' insubordination. The police returned to the Gusenberg's accusation that a police officer had something to do with it. The North Side Gang had stolen a truckload of liquor from a crooked cop who might have retaliated. The investigation's crosshairs returned to the Purple Gang, whose members had good business relations with Scarface. 3 men rented rooms in houses directly across the SMC garage, 10 days before the crime. The police presented mugshots to landladies Mrs. Judy and Mrs. Orvidson, along with other landladies. These were of the Purple Gang members George Lewis, Eddie Fletcher, Phil Keywell, and his younger brother Harry. All of them were questioned and cleared. The police also eyed Capone hitmen John Scalise and Albert Anselmi, and bodyguard Frank Rio. They were also searching for Jack Machine Gun McGurn, Capone's top executioner. Whenever multiple shots were fired at a crime scene, the police put the machine gun as one of their possible suspects. Scalise, Anselmi, and McGurn were charged, but Jack was cocky. He had what was called the blonde alibi. He was with his blonde girlfriend Louise Rolfe across state lines. He said that he believed it was the cops. The other 2 were released as well due to lack of evidence. Capone had Scalise murdered just 3 months after the massacre. But another key piece of evidence came out 8 days after Valentine's Day. On February 22, a 1927 Cadillac sedan, disassembled and partially burnt, was found in a garage fire on Wood Street. This was the car used by the murderers. The engine number was traced back to a Michigan Avenue dealer who sold the car to a certain James Morton in Los Angeles. The burnt garage had been rented by a certain Frank Rogers, who gave his address as 1859 West North Avenue. It led to the Circus Cafe, an establishment operated by Claude Maddox, born John Edward Moore, the head of the Circus Cafe gang and a member of a gang called Egan's Rats. The man had ties with the Chicago outfit and the Purple Gang. The police did not find anything about this James Morton and Frank Rogers. It could be safe to say that these were just invented names. A witness then came out with a testimony. A truck driver named Elmer Lewis claimed to have sideswiped a police car a block away from 2122 North Clark Street, just minutes before the murders. The driver just shooed him away. He was missing a front tooth, Elmer remembered. Board of Education President H. Wallace Caldwell said to have witnessed the sideswiping and claimed to not have seen any front tooth either. The police were confident that this was none other than the toothless Fred Killer Burke, a former member of Egan's Rats. Burke and his friend James Ray were infamous for dressing in police uniforms during their robbery sprees. Sadly for the police, Fred was in hiding as a fugitive. But on December 14, 1929, a drunken Burke rear-ended another vehicle of a man named Forrest Cool and just ran off. Patrolman Charles Skelly pursued him, but the killer shot him 3 times to death. Burke sped away but crashed. He was nowhere to be found afterward. The vehicle driven by Fred Burke was registered under the alias Frederick Dane. It was confirmed that Dane was indeed Burke. Police raided his bungalow in St. Joseph, Michigan. A large trunk with a bulletproof vest, almost $320,000 US in bonds freshly stolen from a Wisconsin bank, 2 Tommy guns, pistols, 2 shotguns, and a bunch of ammunition was found in the bungalow. Forensic ballistics led by forensic scientist Calvin Goddard identified the weapons as the guns used in the massacre. It was also used in the 1928 murder of Frankie Yale. Burke was caught a year later under the alias Richard F. White and was sentenced to life imprisonment for the murder of Skelly. His answers about the massacre were never made public for some odd reason. He was never charged for that crime. He died of a heart attack in prison in 1940, buried under the alias Thomas Camp. Some suggested that the feds wanted to pin the massacre on Capone himself. Another lead comes into the scene on January 8, 1935. The FBI raided a Chicago apartment building at 3920 North Pine Grove in search of the remaining members of the Barker Karpis gang, one of the most notorious and longest-lived criminal gangs during the Depression era, led by Fred Barker, Arthur Doc Barker, and Alvin Francis Creepy Karpis. Shots were fired. Bank robber Russell Gibson died in the encounter. One of the people taken in custody was another bank robber named Byron Bolton, an associate of Egan's Rats. He had acted as the valet of Chicago outfit hitman Fred Getz, also known as Shotgun George Ziegler. Bolton claimed that he was one of the culprits in the St. Valentine's Day massacre, together with Getz and Burke among several others. Bolton's revelations were kept secret due to some quirk about the FBI not having jurisdiction in a state murder case. But muddled versions went out in the media, in particular to the Chicago American newspaper, where they declared the crime as solved, even though the FBI and its first director, J. Edgar Hoover, washed their hands of the case. According to the reports, Bolton asserted that among the people plotting for Moran's assassination were Getz, Burke, and Al Capone, among others. He was in charge, together with a certain Jimmy Moran, to watch the SMC cartage warehouse and signal the killers at the Circus Cafe once Bugs Moran arrives. The killers, according to him, were Burke, Getz, Maddox, Gus Winkler, an associate of Capone, head of a Prohibition-era criminal gang specializing in armed robbery and murder for hire, Robert Bob Carey, an armed robber, contract killer, and a member of the Egan's Rats, and Raymond Craneneck Nugent, a Capone hitman. There weren't 4 men, there were 4 shooters and 2 getaway drivers. Bolton said that all of them were in plainclothes. Nobody was in a police uniform. Days after the massacre, a Peerless Motor Company sedan was found near a house owned by Maddox. The address book of Albert Weinshank, one of the victims, was said to have been found in one of its pockets. The probable reason that the perpetrators missed their target was that Bolton mistook one of the men as Moran himself, most likely Weinshank. They were surprised to find 7 men, but they simply killed them all. Bolton said that Capone was so furious for this mistake that the Chicago outfit boss threatened to execute him. But Getz dissuaded him, and Bolton's life was spared. Georgette Winkler, Gus Winkler's widow, and William Drury, a Chicago detective, corroborated Bolton's claims. Georgette said that Capone trusted her husband and his friends for the kind of operations such as the massacre, calling their crew the American Boys. Alvin Creepy Karpis, one of the leaders of the Barker Karpis gang, the only one taken alive by the FBI out of the 6 criminals ever given the title of Public Enemy Number 1, said that he heard from Nugent about the massacre. He also claimed that Capone told him firsthand that Getz planned the massacre. Despite these revealing statements, the FBI did not make a move. With the exception of Burke and Maddox, all of the men mentioned were dead by 1935. But the whole thing still posed a lot of questions. Why did the assassination plot require a hit squad when one assassin could have sufficed? Why didn't they try again and make sure that Moran was dead? And why was the testimony not used against Capone? But the confession caught a Chicago citizen's attention. On January 28, 1935, Frank T. Farrell wrote a letter to J. Edgar Hoover about information that could be useful to the investigation. Information that could possibly uncover the mystery of the St. Valentine's Day massacre. A former firefighter named William DeVerne Jr., who was the son of a Chicago police sergeant, was shot in the stomach during a bar fight in the C&O restaurant at 509 North Clark Street back in November 1928. This place was a popular gangster hangout. He was left for dead in the corner of Rush Street and Austin Avenue. He managed to crawl to a fire station call box to call for help. He wouldn't dare name any names to the police. But he did tell his cousin, William Three Finger Jack White. He named several members of Bugs Moran's gang, including one of the Gusenberg brothers. These were the men who shot him. DeVerne died a month later. White was still seeking vengeance. Three Finger Jack contacted one of the Gusenberg brothers who was involved in the murder, asking for their assistance for his plan in holding up a factory for its payroll. He might have known the brothers. He was said to have worked with them in a 1926 robbery. One of the men involved in that crime ratted to the cops. In his plot to whack this rat, White arranged for two men to disguise as police officers and murder the rat in his sleep. He believed that the uniforms could gain their trust and drop their defenses. White was in cahoots with crooked cops. It is possible that he had help with Sergeant William J. DeVerne of the Chicago Police Department, the father of the man killed by the North Side Gang. It might have been revenge then. The gravity of the emotions involved could perhaps explain the fury of the bullets littered on the bodies of the victims. And the investigation didn't go anywhere. Perhaps because a certain sergeant had something to do with it. If ever Capone really had something to do with it, he kind of won in the end anyway. Moran completely lost control of the territory he once ruled after the massacre. Moran had said about the massacre, "Only Capone kills like that," while Capone sarcastically replied, "The only man who kills like that is Bugs Moran." The SMC cartridge warehouse was torn down in 1967. A Vancouver businessman named George Patty bought the 414 bricks of the wall in which the victims were shot. The holes of the St. Valentine's Day massacre were still present. Each brick was lettered and numbered. Over the next 42 years, the bricks became a part of a traveling exhibit, housed in the Crime Museum, and displayed in the men's restroom of a nightclub. Many of them later sold to individuals. In 2012, the rest were transferred to the Mob Museum in Las Vegas, in a place where visitors could witness the last thing those 7 victims saw before they died.
And there we go. That is the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, which, again, they believe that, excuse me, Capone is responsible for, of course. So, again, 1 second here. Let me give you guys 1 second, guys. Pull this up so you can guys get a little Rachel Smith, good to see you. Little idea about this other. 1 second here.
Thompson.
1 minute. Sorry, guys. I'm trying to find the exact one I had. All right. Why? I don't care. Okay, I'm going to give you guys this little story here. And this will probably bring it down for the night. We'll talk a little bit about it after. I got you, Bean. hold on a minute here.
Before we start today,
Second, guys. All right. Okay, everybody. Star Sorcerer. Sorry about that, folks. I thought I had this one thing and it didn't work anymore for some reason, so my apologies for the delay on it. No, Adam, that is not true. All right, everybody. And again, if you guys have any issues hearing it or anything, please let me know. Okay.
It has some information that I'm pretty sure the general public does not know, and it's pretty interesting, so I'm going to read it to you. Blood, Roses, and Valentines, the haunted history of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. For a city that is so filled with the history of crime, there has been little preservation of the landmarks that were once so important to the legend of the mob in Chicago. Gone are the landmarks like the Lexington Hotel, where Al Capone kept the fifth-floor suite and used the place as his headquarters. But most tragic, at least to crime buffs, was the destruction of the warehouse that was located at 2122 North Clark Street. It was here on Valentine's Day 1929 that the most spectacular mob hit in gangland history took place, the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. Now here's a picture of the legendary SMC Carthage Company at 2122 North Clark Street in Chicago. The bloody events of February 14, 1929 began nearly 5 years before with the murder of Dion O'Banion, the leader of Chicago's North Side mob. At that time, control of bootleg liquor in the city raged back and forth between the North Siders, run by O'Banion, and the South Side outfit, which was controlled by Johnny Torrio and his henchman, Al Capone. In November 1924, Torrio ordered the assassination of O'Banion and started an all-out war in the city. The North Siders retaliated soon afterwards and nearly killed Torrio outside his home. This brush with death led him to leaving the city and turning over operations to Capone, who was almost killed himself in September of 1926. The following month, Capone's shooters assassinated Jaime Weiss, who had been running the North Side mob after the death of O'Banion. His murder left the operation in the hands of George Bugs Moran, a longtime enemy of Capone. For the most part, Moran stood alone against the Capone mob, since most of his allies had succumbed in the fighting. He continued to taunt his powerful enemy and look for ways to destroy him. In early 1929, Moran sided with Joe Aiello in another attack against Capone. He and Aiello reportedly gunned down Pasquiliano Lolordo, one of Capone's men, and Capone vowed that he would have him wiped out on February 14th. He was living on his estate outside Miami at the time and put in a call to Chicago. Capone had a very special Valentine that he wanted delivered to Moran. Through a contact in Detroit, Capone arranged for someone to call Moran and tell him that a special shipment of hijacked whiskey was going to be delivered to one of Moran's garages on the North Side. Adam Hayer, a friend of Moran, owned the garage, and it was used as a distribution point for North Side liquor. A sign on the front of the building at 2122 North Clark Street read, SMC Carthage Company, shipping, packing, long-distance hauling. Moran received the call at the garage on the morning of February 13th, and he arranged to be there to meet the truck the next day. On the morning of February 14th, a group of Moran's men arrived at Clark Street Garage. One of the men was Johnny May, an ex-safecracker who had been hired by Moran as an auto mechanic. He was working on a truck that morning with his dog, a German Shepherd named Highball, tied to the bumper. In addition, 6 other men waited for the truck of hijacked whiskey to arrive. The men were Frank and Pete Gusenberg, who were supposed to meet Moran and pick up 2 empty trucks to drive to Detroit and pick up smuggled Canadian whiskey. James Clark, Moran's brother-in-law, Adam Heyer, Al Weinshank, and Reinhard Schwimmer, a young optometrist who had befriended Moran and hung around the liquor warehouse just for the thrill of rubbing shoulders with gangsters. George Moran was already late for the morning meeting. He was due to arrive at 10:30, but didn't even leave for the rendezvous in the company of Willie Marks and Ted Newberry until several minutes after that. As the 7 men waited inside of the warehouse, they had no idea that a police car had pulled up outside, or that Moran had spotted the car as he was driving south on Clark Street, and rather than deal with what he believed was a shakedown, stopped at the next corner for a cup of coffee. 5 men got out of the police car, 2 of them in uniforms, and 3 in civilian clothing. They entered the building, and a few moments later, the clatter of machine gun fire broke the stillness of the snowy morning. Soon after, 5 figures emerged, and they drove away. May's dog inside the warehouse began barking and howling. The landlady in the next building, Mrs. Jeanette Landesman, was bothered by the sound of the dog, and she sent one of her boarders, C.L. McAllister, to the garage to see what was going on. He came out 2 minutes later, his face a pale white color. He ran frantically up the stairs to beg Mrs. Landesman to call the police. He cried that the garage was full of dead men. The police were quickly summoned, and on entering the garage were stunned by the carnage. Moran's men had been lined up against the rear wall of the garage and had been sprayed with machine guns. Pete Gusenberg had died kneeling, slumped over a chair. James Clark had fallen on his face, with half of his head blown away, and Hare, Schwimmer, Weinshank, and May were thrown lifeless onto their backs. Only one of the men survived the slaughter, and he lived only a few hours, Frank Gusenberg. Frank Gusenberg had crawled from the blood-sprayed wall where he had fallen and dragged himself into the middle of the dirty floor. He was rushed to the Alexian Brothers Hospital, barely hanging on. Police Sergeant Clarence Sweeney, who had grown up on the same street as Gusenberg, leaned down close to Frank and asked who had shot him. "No one shot me. No one. Nobody shot me," he groaned, and he died later that night. The death toll of the massacre stood at 7, but the killers had missed Moran. When the police contacted him later and told him what had happened at the garage, he raved like a madman. To the newspapers, Moran targeted Capone as ordering the hit. The authorities claimed to be baffled, though, since Capone was in Florida at the time of the massacre. When he was asked to comment on the news, Capone stated, "The only man who kills like that is Bugs Moran." At the same time, Moran was proclaiming that only Capone kills guys like that, and Moran was undoubtedly right. The murders broke the power of the North Side Gang, and while there have been many claims as to who the actual shooters were that day, most likely they included John Scalise, Albert Anselmi, and Machine Gun Jack McGurn, all of whom were some of Capone's most trusted men. All 3 men, along with Joseph Giunta, were arrested, but McGurn had an alibi, and Scalise and Gunta were killed before they could be tried. The St. Valentine's Day massacre marked the end of any significant gang opposition to Capone, but it was also the act that finally began the decline of Capone's criminal empire. He had just gone too far, and the authorities, and even Capone's adoring public, were ready to put an end to the bootleg wars. Perhaps the strangest bit of history in regards to the massacre involved the fact that Capone had not seen the last of one of the men killed on that fateful day. In May 1929, Capone slipped out of town to avoid the heat that was still coming down from the massacre and to avoid being suspected in the deaths of several of the men believed responsible for the killing of the Moran gang. While in Philadelphia, he and his bodyguard, Frankie Rio, were picked up on charges of carrying concealed weapons and were sentenced to a year in prison. They eventually ended up in the Eastern State Penitentiary. Capone continued to conduct business from prison. He was given a private cell and allowed to make long-distance telephone calls from the warden's office and to meet with his lawyers and with Frank Nitti, Jake Gusick, and his brother Ralph, all of whom made frequent trips to Philadelphia. He was released 2 months early on good behavior, and when he returned to Chicago, he found himself branded public enemy number 1. It was while he was incarcerated in Pennsylvania that Capone first began to be haunted by the ghost of James Clark, one of the massacre victims and the brother-in-law of George Moran. While in prison, other inmates reported that they could hear Capone screaming in his cell, begging Jimmy to go away and leave me alone. After Capone returned to Chicago, he took up residence at the Lexington Hotel, and while here, would report his most frequent encounters with the ghost. While living at the Lexington Hotel, there were many times when Capone's men would hear from strange begging for the specter to leave him in peace. On several occasions, bodyguards broke into his rooms, fearing that someone had gotten to their boss. Capone would then tell them of Clark's ghost. Whether the ghost was real or not, Capone certainly believed that he was. The crime boss even went so far as to contact a psychic named Alice
Now,
Britt.
understand, you guys, that Capone had syphilis, which eventually it caused it causes like mental issues after not being treated, things like that. So this is where a lot of that comes. Thank you, Heather, for that again, where a lot of this comes from. Mike dropping, Mom, what's happening? Good to have you here. Thanks for joining us tonight. So remember that in the back of your mind as you're listening to this. Him seeing ghosts is what he thought, but it was truly because of the disease he was carrying.
To get rid of Clark's angry spirit. Not long after a seance was conducted to try and rid Capone of the vengeful spirit, Jaime Cornish, Capone's personal valet, also believed that he saw the ghost. He entered the lounge of Capone's apartment and spotted a tall man standing near the window. He demanded to know the man's identity, but the shadowy figure slipped behind a curtain and out of sight. Cornish immediately summoned 2 of his employer's bodyguards, but a search of the room revealed that there was no one there but Al Capone, who continued to insist that the figure had been Jimmy Clark. Years later, Capone would insist that Jimmy Clark followed him to the grave. Here's a photo of Canadian George Pate with bricks from the wall of the garage where the massacre took place. And here's a picture. It says, one of the bricks from the massacre authenticated to be from the wall where the murders occurred. Over the years, other bricks have turned up that were allegedly taken from the warehouse. According to stories, they are cursed. Chicago, in its own style, memorialized the warehouse on Clark Street. The place became a tourist attraction, and the newspapers even printed the photos of the corpses upside down so that readers would not have to turn their papers around to identify the bodies. In 1949, the front portion of SMC Garage was turned into an antique furniture storage business by a couple who had no idea of the building's bloody past. They soon found that the place was visited much more by tourists and curiosity seekers than by customers, and eventually closed their business. In 1967, the building was demolished. However, the bricks from the bullet-marked rear wall were purchased and saved by a Canadian businessman. In 1972, he opened a nightclub with a Roaring Twenties theme and rebuilt the wall for some strange reason in the men's restroom. 3 nights each week, women were allowed to peek inside at this macabre attraction. The club continued to operate for a few years, and when it closed, the owner placed the 417 bricks in storage. He then offered them for sale with a written account of the massacre. He sold the bricks for $1,000 each, but soon found that he was getting back as many as he sold. It seemed that anyone who bought one of the bricks was suddenly stricken with bad luck in the form of illness, financial ruin, divorce, and even death. According to the stories, the bricks themselves had somehow been infested with the powerful negative energy of the massacre. Whatever became of the rest of the bricks is unknown, or that's what the legend says. In recent years, other bricks have emerged that claim to have come from the wall. These were not bricks purchased from Pate, but were smuggled out of the lot by construction workers and curiosity seekers. It was said these bricks come from the legends of misfortune and bad luck. Are these bricks authentic? The owners say they are, but you have to judge for yourself. Whatever the legend of the bricks themselves, and whether or not they have somehow been haunted by what happened, there is little doubt about the site on Clark Street itself. Even today, people walking along the street at night have reported the sounds of screams and machine guns as they pass the site. The building is long gone, but the area is marked as fenced-off lawn that belongs to a nearby nursing home. 5 trees are scattered along the place in a line, and the one in the middle marks the location where the rear wall once stood. Passers-by often report strange sounds and the indescribable feeling of fear as they walk past. Those who are accompanied by dogs report their share of strangeness too. Animals appear to be especially bothered by this piece of lawn, sometimes barking and howling, sometimes whining in fear. The sense of what happened here many years ago seems to be much greater than our own.
Yeah, my mother dropped off some, she doesn't care for them, but they had some green olives stuffed with blue cheese, and I like them, so just had a couple to munch on real quick. So that's the house, or the building, I'm sorry, with the address.
I found this webpage at prairieghost.com, and it's about the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. It has some information that I'm pretty sure the general public does not know, and it's pretty interesting, so I'm going to read it to you. Blood, Roses, and Valentines, the haunted history of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. For a city that is so filled with the history of crime.
Okay, so we went through this already. Yeah, he's just repeating himself. All right, so that was that. Like I said, as far as the ghost part of it goes, I don't know, guys. I was told that Capone started seeing things towards the end of his life due to he was hallucinating due to the fact that he had syphilis. It was left untreated the right way, and in turn, it caused that kind of stuff to happen, which it can. If you look it up, and it's pretty interesting. So he should have maybe not been such a hound dog, we'll say, and he probably wouldn't have had that problem. But there it is for this evening, guys. That is the first episode of what we're going to be covering, and there is so much more that we're going to be getting into. Does anybody have any questions in regards to that? We're not done yet, guys. That's the part of it that I was showing you that way. Any questions directly in regards to that? I'm going to show you guys some other stuff, but as far as that stuff goes, that's what it is. Also, sorry, folks. Oh, you were getting to that. Okay. Gotcha. There's not a lot for some reason on Bugs Moran. Okay, there's a bit, but not a whole lot. I'll show you guys here what it does show a little bit about. We're going to be moving on. There's quite a few more of these gentlemen out there. And this is just a Wikipedia type scenario. George Clarence Bugs Moran was an American Chicago Prohibition era gangster. He was incarcerated 3 times before his 21st birthday. 7 members of his gang, of course, we know, were gunned down for the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. He was born Adelaide Cunin to a French immigrant father, Jules Adelaide Cunin, and a mother of Canadian descent, Marie Diana Goville, which is, French Canadian, in St. Paul, Minnesota. He attended Cretin High School, a private Catholic school in St. Paul, but he also joined a local juvenile gang and left school at age 18. He was later caught robbing a store and was sent to the State Juvenile Correctional Facility and was put in jail 3 times before he turned 21. He then fled to Chicago, where he was caught trying to rob a warehouse, taking part in horse stealing rings. Taking part in robbery involving the death of a police officer and robbing a freight car, for which he received a variety of prison and jail sentences. Prohibition was established in 1920, by the way. For those of you that don't know what it is, it was an enactment of the 18th Amendment, which banned the distribution of alcoholic beverages, imagine that, resulting in bootlegging. Boom, boom, boom. You're welcome, Carolyn. Hello, Tree Baby. Good to have you here. After Prohibition, just to give you a little bit, Moran managed to keep control of his territory and what remained of his gang through the early 1930s, and this is all after everything that went down. The North Side Gang never fully recovered its power or former place in Chicago's underworld as the chief rival to Capone's Italian mob. Moran eventually left the area, quitting the gang entirely, though not the criminal lifestyle. He reverted to his early gangster ways of petty crimes such as mail fraud and robbery. So a lot of these guys never did anything legal, guys. Nothing. It's the only thing they knew. So it is what it is. On April 30th of 1939, Moran was convicted of conspiracy to cash $62,000 worth of American Express checks. He was freed on appeal when he posted a bond. He fled but was captured and not released until December 21st of 1944. He was also penniless by the 1940s, only 17 years after being one of the richest gangsters in Chicago. On July 6th of 1946, he was arrested for his involvement in the robbery of a Dayton, Ohio tavern on June 28, 1945, and he received a sentence of 20 years after being found guilty. He was paroled in 1956, but was immediately arrested for his role in the 1945 robbery of a bank in Ansonia, Ohio. He was found guilty in 1957 and sentenced to 10 more years in prison. Bugs Moran died of lung cancer a few months into his 10-year sentence at Fort Leavenworth Federal Prison in Kansas on February 25th of 1957 at the age of 63. He was married to Lucille Logan, I can never say this name, Balziktian, there we go. Sorry. With whom he had a son, John George Moran, who left him because of his criminal lifestyle. In 1922, he married Evelyn Harrell. No known photographs of Evelyn exist. Let's see here. I think that's pretty much it as far as Bugs goes. But yes, he was one of the early gangsters that ran Chicago, guys. He was listed as a gangster, bootlegger, and part of the North Side Gang. Crime don't pay, does it, folks? They always end up in the end. Is it not being a good thing? You know, they didn't come out ahead in the end as they should have, as they thought they were going to, I should say. I do many things at once. It gets me mixed up, especially at 2 a.m. Understand, Adam. Understand. So there is that. Okay, so that takes care of that scenario. Did anybody have any questions about any of this at all? As I said, Thursday we are going to be moving to a episode number 2. It's going to be a different variation of the same type of stuff. It may have some of the same names, but it's going to be adding more names to it. And we'll continue on as we go. And like I said, I am going all the way, guys. There's going to be a lot of names to remember, a lot of scenarios, situations. We're going to be getting into a specific, which a lot of you guys probably know, a specific police officer or law enforcement official, I should say, or law enforcement officer by the name of Elliot Ness, who was very, very involved in trying to take down a lot of these criminals, gangsters, whatever you want to call it. He himself was somebody had referred to him as a legal gangster. Okay, that's the way he handled certain things with these guys. Will you touch on UK? Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely will, because I'll be honest with you guys, the UK mafia ran hand in hand with what was going on over here, believe it or not. And there's quite a few of them too. So we will be talking about that as well, Adam. Quite interesting. I mean, this stuff isn't for everybody. It is, true crime based, guys. There's a lot of stuff that went on. Some of these scenarios you guys aren't going to believe if you don't know them already. But there's a lot to it. There's a lot of things that went down that they were behind. Like I said, there was a lot of what they call wise guys, okay, that weren't per se important people in the organized crime scenario, okay? The way that things were just explained to me, I had a few relatives that were wise guys. That's why I know a lot of this stuff. That's what they were considered as wise guys, okay? Yes, the Craze connection, right? That's pretty dark there too. And some things were talked about that in our family. So that's how I know a lot of these other things too. And of course, a lot of this stuff is now available to look at the touch of a button online. So my grandfather, for instance, like I said, my grandfather was highly involved in the Cleveland area and stuff that went on up that way. And I guess in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, actually all throughout, all the way up until probably the 80s, organized crime was very heavy in Ohio. Okay. Cleveland and Dayton, Youngstown was a thoroughway for a lot of it. W. Smith, yeah. And so, little quick story I heard. I don't know how many of you guys, which we're going to be touching on him too, are familiar with John Dillinger. He was quite a gangster himself. Excuse me, guys. Sorry. And we had a place where I grew up at, a little restaurant, very nice, classy little restaurant in town, right downtown. What the hell was it called? I want to say it was called the Central Cafe, but I'll find pictures of it and stuff to show you down the road here because I'm probably going to retell this story. Amen to that one, Adam. So, John Dillinger was a bank robber, okay? A lot of people did not know what John Dillinger looked like because of what he did. Now, I still don't understand how this went down, okay? But this restaurant, John Dillinger would come through the town that I grew up in back in those days. Here, I'll give you a little look at him real quick. We're going to touch on him down the road here a little bit more too, but 1 second here. Okay, so this is John Dillinger here. Right there, okay? Anthony Giovanni DeLuca. Oh, okay. Tony DeLuca. Oh, interesting. That's really interesting, actually. So, my grandfather would go into this restaurant. He did this more than once, from my understanding, okay, when he was younger. And because Dillinger, this guy was from Indiana, I believe, and he would go all over the place between here, Chicago, whatever, but would come into this area, the Youngstown, Cleveland, Warren area was really big for these guys back in those days. They would run numbers through here. They had money runs and things like that. Just tons and tons of stuff. Well, John Dillinger would stop at this restaurant. He had his own table that he would sit at, so on and so forth, okay? And from my understanding, this place had different people here and there. I think it was twice that my grandfather did this. He went in, which blows my mind. Stupid is what it is. He went in there 2 different occasions and got away with this and claimed to be, his name was John, by the way, too, but not Dillinger, would claim to be this guy right here, okay? Would get that seat, would eat his meal for free, would leave, that's how it was understood to me, is that they would feed him for free, gourmet food, because this restaurant was very expensive. But because of who he was, they didn't expect him to pay. And my grandfather would walk in. He did it twice, like I said who he was. They never questioned it. He sat down at his meal. He did this with one of his friends, I guess, and left a little bit of a money for a tip, I guess, and walked out. And then did it again at another time. Meanwhile, in between here, this guy had been in that place, and I'm guessing that some of the people in there realized that this guy don't look like this guy, okay? And I'm thinking, like, that's a death sentence to somebody like this, because this guy was pretty hardcore. So this is the kind of stuff that my grandfather did when he was younger. along with bad stuff that he got into too that he probably shouldn't have, which I can tell you stories about later down the road. So that's why they were referred to as wise guys for this reason, that reason. They were always doing this or that, getting into this and getting into that. So that was a story that I was told by my grandmother, actually, twice. He did that and lived to tell about it. Because if this guy would have figured out what was going on and found him, that, or God forbid, he would have walked in there the same time my grandfather was in there pretending to be this guy. The thing that kind of caught me with that story was like, if this guy was going in there regularly, I would think that most people would have recognized who he was compared to who my grandfather was and said, no, you're not, blah, blah, blah. I don't know how that happened or didn't happen or whatever it is. My grandmother didn't really tell me that part of it, but she did tell me that story. I thought was quite interesting. So again, yeah, we're going to be covering him here pretty quickly here coming up. So tune in if you're interested. Thank you, Miss Heather. I appreciate that. If you guys do want to become a member of the family here, become a meatball. And it gives you exclusive access to the Discord, the movie nights we do, the music nights that I do, as I did Saturday night was a good time. If you're a member of the family already, get in touch with Miss Brandy or somebody in here. They will get you into Discord if you're interested. It's a lot of fun, guys. We have a good time in there. There's a lot of different channels in there. Thank you, Miss Heather and Stevie. They have really, really set it up nice in there for all you guys to enjoy. And I'm in there all the time talking back and forth to everybody. Sometimes you get updates on certain things before I do the streams on it. And early bird ideas as to what's going to be coming up with future shows and stuff like that. We do have separate channels in there where we talk about case files and stuff like that too. And it's just a nice place to go in my opinion, for people to just kind of hang out. So we do that a lot. That's how the Discord works if you're not familiar with it. But I enjoy it. I enjoy being able to hang out with all you guys in there. After the fact, we're going to be setting up relatively soon here too. Games in that in the Discord that we can play. We're talking about the Jackbox games set up for what they have in there. We're definitely going to be talking about him, W. Smith. He's part of what this is about. It's coming up here soon. Like I said, it's going to be all over the place, guys, but it will be coming up soon. So we're going to be talking about him. I'm going to learn a lot. We're going to be talking about him, Charles Lucky Luciano, more Capone, more Bugsy Siegel. Let's see. There's just so many more. And we're going to work our way up. Okay. When we get into the Genovese families and the Gaudis and all of that, it's just going to keep on going, guys. So if you want to learn some stuff about it beforehand, feel free. But I love talking this stuff to you guys. I really do. Stevie's doing it. Yeah, Stevie's really kicking ass in there too. I'm really super impressed with it. So thank you again, Stevie. It's great in there, guys. I was new to Discord when I started doing it. I didn't know much about it. So when we set it up, I was pretty much in the dark for it. So Stevie came upon it, said, hey, let me do this and this and this. And he went nuts. And it looks great now. Do you know about the Stanford prison experiment? I did hear about that story. It's interesting. It's very interesting. Very interesting. So I'd love to tell that story, actually. I'd like to learn more about it, but I would love to tell it because it's a very interesting story. I don't know much about it, but I know a little. No. Thank you again, Miss Heather. I appreciate it. So does anybody have any questions or thoughts on any of this? Any specific things that you would like to talk about with this? I'm pretty much going to cover it all, so it'll probably be involved in it, but hint, my people. Yes, sir. Again, guys, like I said, in that Discord thing, Oh, yeah. It is very interesting, all of this stuff. And that story, like I said, the little bit I know about it is very interesting. I'd like to know the whole thing. I'm gonna have to look into it, and we can definitely talk about it. So be it. But yeah, guys, like I said, the Discord thing the other night, we had a good time in there. I mean, there was like 12 or 13 of us, I think, hanging out. I was playing music videos. Everybody was talking about different variations of music. And it's a good way to get to know each other, too, for you guys that are in here. It gives you a little more intimate time with each other, to know each other and talk about things that, we've all gone through. And that's what I like about it. It brings the family, as I call it, together. So it is what it is. And I thank you, Stevie, again, Heather, Brandy, for making that thing run the way I had no idea to make it run. So I think that is that. And Whitey Bolt. Oh, yeah, that's coming too, W. I'm doing it all. I am doing it all. The Irishman, all of it. As I said, it's going to take us a while to cover it all. And we still may not get it all, but we're going to get as much of it as I can. Canadian True Crime Buff, thank you, guys. I will be live tomorrow again between 12 to 12:30. Doing our thing. It may be a surprise, but it will be something you're familiar with for sure. And I hope to see you all there, should you choose to be. I appreciate you guys so very much for supporting us in here, just for being here. You guys are great. I really do love you guys for that, for supporting us during the day when we have our live streams that way. That means the world to me. Again, guys, anybody that donated to support the channel, that is very much appreciated. That keeps me coming out and paying the bills. You're welcome. That the sauce is running like a well-oiled machine. Absolutely. Thank you, Brandy. Mikey, what are you laughing at, bro? Groot. If you guys would please leave a comment in the comment section after the fact, so I know what you guys think of this. It's going to get better, guys, and bigger, and probably a little bit longer. These I try not to keep them as long because it's late, and I figured you guys don't want to spend your whole night in here with me, so they won't be as long. Right around 2 hours is pretty much how I like to run these ones at the max. So that's a fact, Mikey. Thank you. All of you guys have an amazing rest of your night. I look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow, 12:30 Eastern Standard Time. I hope you have an amazing night. Don't forget, guys, to love yourselves, to love each other, because that's all we got. And do not change a thing about yourselves, because you are the beautiful people. And I will see you all so very soon. Good night, everybody.